Wealth is not just measured in dollars, not just in assets, investments, or the way your name sits at the bottom of a contract. True wealth, the kind that sustains you, expands you, surrounds you with richness beyond calculation, begins with one thing: the depth of your empathy. Not your hustle, not your performance, not your ambition alone, but your ability to feel, to see, to understand the invisible world inside others. Because influence without empathy is manipulation. Success without empathy is exploitation. Power without empathy is dangerous. You want to grow something that lasts? Then you must first be willing to grow inside. You must learn to hear the words people don't say, to watch the way their shoulders sink when they enter a room, to notice the smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Because that's where people live, in those silent details. That's where loyalty is born. That's where relationships take root. That's where the gold is buried beneath what most are too busy or too self-centered to notice. And Dale Carnegie knew it. He didn't build his legacy by shouting louder than everyone else. He built it by caring deeper than anyone else dared to. You can make more friends in 2 months by becoming interested in other people, he said, than you can in 2 years by trying to get other people interested in you. That's not a strategy. That's a truth. A timeless law of human nature. Because when people feel seen, they lean in. When they feel heard, they open up. And when they feel understood, they trust. And where there is trust, there is room for influence, for collaboration, for success, to take root in something far deeper than transaction. So many people chase success like it's a finish line. They step on others on the way up. They manipulate emotions. They flatter when they want something. They ghost when they no longer need you. And then they wonder why their wealth feels so empty, why their team doesn't stay loyal, why their relationships feel like sand slipping through closed fists. It's because they built everything on the surface, and the surface never holds. You want wealth? Real wealth? The kind that multiplies and expands and touches, lives long after you're gone. Then build depth, build empathy, build the capacity to care so deeply, so truly, so selflessly, that people feel safe around you, not because you're perfect, but because your presence is honest. Empathy doesn't mean agreeing with everyone. It means honoring the soul behind their struggle. It means looking past behavior and seeing belief, past anger and seeing pain, past silence and seeing history. And you only get there when you've walked through your own shadows, when you've felt the cold edge of rejection, and now know how to warm others through it, when you've sat with loneliness long enough that someone else's isolation feels like your own, when you've made peace with your own scars so you can touch someone else's without trembling. That's empathy, not just emotion, but connection. And from connection, everything flows. Sales? From connection. Leadership? From connection. Partnership? From connection. And connection only grows where empathy has made a home. Because empathy is not weakness. It's intelligence of the soul. It's the ability to meet people where they are, without needing them to be where you wish they were. It's seeing value before the world validates them. It's speaking truth without condescension. It's giving without agenda. Listening without planning your response. Loving without keeping score. And yes, sometimes it hurts. Sometimes you'll give more than you get. Sometimes they won't say thank you. Sometimes your softness will be mistaken for surrender. Let it. You're not building for applause. You're building for legacy. You're not showing empathy to be liked. You're living it because it's who you are. Because you've outgrown the shallow life of performance, and you're no longer impressed by surface-level success. You don't just want to win. You want to mean something. And people will remember you, not for your clothes, your titles, or your highlight reel, but for how you made them feel when they were uncertain, unseen, and undone. That's the echo you leave behind. That's the measure of true wealth. Because in the end, it's not how many people clapped for you that matters, it's how many people healed in your presence. How many felt safe to speak without being judged? How many felt worthy without needing to perform? How many walked away from your words, not just inspired, but transformed? That is wealth. And it can't be faked. It can't be staged. It can't be bought. It comes from a heart that's been through fire and refused to harden, from eyes that have cried but still see the good, from hands that have been empty but now reach to give. You realize this. Money can open doors, but empathy holds them open. Power can command a room, but empathy keeps the room intact. Influence can spark admiration, but empathy builds loyalty. And loyalty is the seed of everything. Enduring teams that don't quit, clients that return, relationships that weather storms. People don't follow what you do. They follow how you make them feel while you're doing it. That's what they remember. That's what they take with them. And that's what they share when they talk about you, when you're not around. Dale Carnegie taught that success is built not on dominance, but on dignity, not on force, but on presence. People are not obstacles to be managed. They are mirrors. They reflect your tone, your intention, your emotional temperature. If you approach people with fear, they retreat. With arrogance, they resist. But if you approach with empathy, with that quiet, grounded strength that says, I see you, I hear you, and I value your existence, everything shifts. Barriers dissolve. Defensiveness fades. Conversations go deeper. Trust begins. And when trust begins, wealth follows. Because empathy is not just emotional, it's strategic. It's the bridge between hearts and minds. It's what makes your message land, your influence last, your leadership matter. And the more you grow in empathy, the more expansive your life becomes. Doors open, not because you force them, but because people want to hold them open for you. Because they remember that you were the one who looked them in the eye and didn't look away. The one who cared before they succeeded. The one who listened when it was inconvenient. The one who showed up not for credit, but for connection. But this kind of empathy doesn't come from books. It doesn't come from scripts. It comes from experience, from letting life break your pride, from sitting in silence when all you wanted was to be right, from feeling your own pain and refusing to weaponize it, from holding space for others without needing to be the hero. This is the slow work, the quiet work, the real work, and the ones who commit to it. They are the ones who rise. Because the world doesn't need more charismatic performers. It needs emotionally fluent leaders. It needs people who can feel without being flooded. People who can speak without belittling. People who can listen without controlling. People who can lead from the heart without losing their head. That's what empathy gives you. The ability to stand firm and soft at the same time. To hold your ground and hold someone else's pain at once. To say, I disagree with you, and still mean, I respect you. That's rare. That's real. That's the edge you're building now, not by pushing, but by perceiving. Not by controlling, but by connecting. And slowly, quietly, deeply, everything changes. You begin to draw people into your life who carry the same depth. Conversations get richer. Partnerships become more aligned. Money flows, not because you chase it, but because you've become the kind of person worth investing in, and people can feel it. Empathy has a texture. It's in your tone, in your timing, in the pauses you take, in the way you ask questions that don't have answers, because sometimes the asking is more powerful than the solving. When people feel comfortable around you, they stop trying to impress you and start being real. That's when trust begins. And when people trust you, they want to work with you, talk to you, and stay connected. This is how strong friendships and lasting business relationships are built not through perfection, but through sincerity. You stop focusing on looking successful. You start focusing on being whole. And in that wholeness, your wealth begins to mirror you not just in numbers, but in meaning. Not just in profits, but in presence. Not just in achievement, but in alignment. And what begins to grow in you is not just influence, it's integrity. You no longer speak just to impress. You speak to serve. You no longer listen for advantage. You listen for understanding. You no longer show kindness to be remembered. You show kindness because it's who you are, even when no one is watching, especially when no one is watching. That's where real wealth starts in the invisible, sacred acts of care that no one will ever post, count, or quote. In the way you hold the door. In the way you remember someone's name when it doesn't benefit you. In the way you choose to see someone as human, even when they make it hard. In the way you give your presence when the world is asking for performance. And slowly, something shifts. You become the person who doesn't just build things, you build people. You lift, you guide, you remind. And you do it not because they asked, but because you remembered what it felt like to be forgotten. You remember what it felt like to be talked at, instead of listened to be seen only for what you could produce, to be valued only when useful. And that memory, rather than making you bitter, makes you deep. It makes you generous with your words, gentle with your authority, gracious with your time, because you realize the fastest way to wealth is to become the kind of person others can trust, not just in results, but in energy, in intention, in humanity. You become the one who leaves people feeling more human than they were before they met you, and that's rare. Rare enough that people talk about you when you're not in the room, not because of what you have, but because of what you gave, because of how they felt around you, because of the echo your empathy left in their heart. And that echo travels. It opens doors you didn't knock on. It places your name in rooms you've never entered. It draws people toward you, not because you're perfect, but because you're safe, grounded, awake, real. And in a world drowning in curated perfection, people crave what's real more than ever. So they follow you, not for charisma, but for character, not for polish, but for presence, not for status, but for soul. And that kind of following is not shallow, it's not performative, it's rooted. And where roots go deep, fruit grows wide. Your business grows, your friendships deepen, your influence multiplies. Not because you demanded attention, but because you gave something more rare. You gave empathy when others offered ego. And people don't forget that. They remember how you paused to ask the second question, the one they didn't expect. They remember how you didn't flinch when they were messy. They remember how your silence made space for their truth. They remember how you weren't threatened by their vulnerability because you had already befriended your own. And that memory, that's wealth. That's legacy. That's the compound interest of a life lived in deep, grounded humanity. Because the truth is, people don't need more advice. They need more presence. They don't need more saviors. They need more sincerity. They don't need another leader in a suit. They need someone who can feel deeply and not run from it. Someone who can sit in discomfort without trying to fix it just to soothe their own nerves. Someone who can be still enough to say, "I see you," and mean it without expectation. That's what makes you magnetic. That's what builds empires that don't collapse when culture shifts. That's what brings abundance that doesn't leave when trends change. Because empathy doesn't go out of style, and the wealth it creates, the kind made of trust, loyalty, healing, honor, that kind of wealth is recession-proof. scandal-proof, platform-proof, because it lives in hearts, not headlines. And the deeper your empathy grows, the wider your influence will stretch, not by chasing, but by radiating, not by selling, but by serving, not by manipulating, but by meaning every word you say. When people feel heard and respected, they feel safe around you. That kind of environment encourages loyalty, growth, and collaboration. They work with you not out of obligation, but because they feel appreciated and supported. The world is not short on intelligence, it's short on warmth. We have knowledge in abundance, but wisdom in drought. We have access, but no intimacy. We have networks, but not connection. And in this hunger, people are starving for something simple yet rare, to be truly felt. Not pitied, not corrected, not managed, but felt, understood, met. And you become that rare oasis, not because you studied empathy, but because you chose to live it. Not because you memorized quotes, but because you asked better questions. Not because you performed kindness, but because you embodied it when no one was watching. That's the kind of presence that becomes priceless. The kind people will protect, refer, follow, and build with. Because here's what nobody tells you about real power. It doesn't dominate. It dignifies. It doesn't control. It calms. It doesn't seek attention. It earns reverence. And reverence is born not in charisma, but in character. In the choices you make when you have nothing to gain. In the tone you keep when others raise their voice. In the way you treat someone who can't repay you. That's the moment people decide who you are. Not when you win. Not when you shine. But when things get inconvenient, uncertain, or unflattering, and you still choose to be kind. That's the kind of wealth that multiplies in silence. Because people don't invest in your product. They invest in your heart. They don't stay because of strategy. They stay because of safety. And safety is built one moment, one breath, one real interaction at a time. But make no mistake, this isn't about being soft. It's about being solid. Empathy doesn't mean bending for everyone. It means seeing clearly, holding boundaries with grace, saying no with love, walking away without hatred, being rooted enough in your own truth that you can meet others in theirs without losing yours. Because when you truly develop empathy, you no longer take things personally. You understand that projection is real. That pain is rarely about you. That anger is often a defense for fear. That judgment is usually self-judgment disguised. So you no longer fight back. You no longer need to win the moment. You win the soul instead, with silence, with presence, with inner authority. And when people experience that kind of steadiness, it opens something ancient in them. It reminds them what they forgot, that it's possible to be powerful and tender, clear and compassionate, respected and kind. And once they taste that, they won't forget you. Not because you impressed them, but because you impacted them. And impact is wealth. And so, the more you cultivate this within, the more aligned your outer life becomes. Your business becomes less about manipulation and more about magnetism. Your conversations shift from performance to presence. Your goals are no longer fueled by proving something. They're guided by a deeper mission to serve, to elevate, to liberate. Because wealth is no longer something you chase. It's something you attract because you've become too whole to need applause, too clear to compete, too grounded to play games. And in this space, life begins to trust you. People trust you with their pain. Teams trust you with their direction. The universe trusts you with more because you've shown you'll handle it with care. Not with entitlement, not with ego, but with reverence. When you truly practice empathy, it changes the way you talk to people, the way you listen, and how you handle challenges. You become more thoughtful in your words, more patient in your actions, and more understanding in your relationships. People notice, and they respond with trust, respect, and loyalty. You're not just creating wealth, you're becoming it. You're not just achieving success, you're embodying it. Because wealth without empathy is a hollow victory. But wealth built on empathy, that's the kind of legacy people carry in their bones. Because when your life is built on empathy, you no longer chase legacy. Legacy begins chasing you. It weaves itself into your ordinary days, into the way you hold a silence, into the pause before you answer, into the way you stay present when someone else breaks apart. That's the ground where legacies grow not in grand gestures, but in sacred consistency. In the small ways, you dignify the moment. In the quiet ways, you remind people that they matter. And this is where everything shifts, from hustle to harmony, from forcing to flowing, from proving to being, because you no longer need to scream to be heard. You've become the kind of person who walks into a room and doesn't need to say much because the energy speaks first. Your stillness speaks. Your kindness speaks. Your depth speaks. And the world listens. Not because you demanded it, but because you became undeniable. That is what empathy does. It doesn't shout. It resounds. It echoes long after the moment ends. It's the difference between being liked and being trusted, between being followed and being remembered, between being popular and being meaningful. And when you begin to understand this, really understand it, you stop wasting energy on empty performances. You stop trading authenticity for applause. You stop chasing validation in places that can't offer it. Instead, you root yourself in truth. And from that truth, you build a different kind of life. A life where relationships thrive because they're real. A life where your reputation is not just crafted, it's earned, moment by moment. A life where your wealth is not just a number, it's the atmosphere you create, the safety people feel, the healing that happens quietly in your presence. That is wealth, the kind they don't teach in school, the kind that no market crash can touch, the kind that compounds invisibly, soul to soul. And it all begins with one choice: to care when it would be easier not to notice when it would be easier to numb, to extend grace when you feel empty, to be curious when you feel cornered, to stay soft when life tries to make you hard. Because empathy is not a reaction, it's a decision to lead differently, to live deeper, to love without keeping score, to give without rehearsing what you'll get back. Over time, when you treat people with kindness and consistency, they begin to trust you. And once people feel safe with you, they won't forget it. That's the kind of impression that lasts, not because of what you say, but how you make them feel. Because in a world addicted to attention, you gave them something rarer: connection. In a world hungry for approval, you gave them something deeper: understanding. And that's what makes you wealthy. Not rich wealthy, the kind of wealth that wraps around you like gravity, the kind of wealth that calls in opportunity, integrity, alignment, and peace, not as separate goals, but as natural byproducts of who you've become. And the irony is, once you become that wholeness, empathy becomes your second nature. You no longer need to convince anyone of your worth. You walk in it, you breathe in it, you build in it, and others follow, not because you command them, but because your life whispers a truth that resonates louder than words ever could. When you live with integrity and treat people with respect, others notice. You become someone they look up to, not because you're perfect, but because you're consistent, honest, and kind. That kind of example helps others believe they can do the same. And so you begin to realize that the wealth of the world is not stored in banks. It is stored in the nervous systems you soothe, in the conflicts you de-escalate, in the pride you dissolve with presence, in the relationships that didn't fracture because you listened instead of reacted, in the children who felt seen because you knelt down to their eye level, in the teams that trusted you, not because you always had the answers, but because you never pretended you did, in the strangers who felt a moment of peace around you and didn't even know why. These are deposits, and they accumulate, but not in currency, in character, not in digits, in dignity, not in trophies, in transformation. And you come to understand that every empathetic act is an investment in your own becoming. Every time you respond with grace, when your ego wants to retaliate, you rise. Every time you remain steady while the world flinches, you ascend. Not upward, but inward into the kind of presence that silences rooms without raising your voice. Into the kind of energy that invites people to be real around you. Because you are real with yourself. That's wealth when you don't have to armor yourself to be respected. When you don't have to dominate to be heard. When your stillness speaks volumes because it is rooted in truth, not performance. When people trust your silence more than they trust others' noise. And this sacred, unspoken trust is what makes you powerful beyond measure. Because the marketplace of the future won't reward the loudest. It will reward the clearest, the calmest, the most emotionally disciplined. The ones who can lead through chaos without becoming chaotic. Who can hold space without collapsing into it. Who can sit with discomfort and not reach for control, but offer compassion instead. Empathy is the ultimate form of leadership. It is the authority of the soul. It is what makes your voice carry weight even when whispered. It is what turns your words into water for thirsty minds. What turns your presence into a place others want to return to. And slowly, everything you touch begins to shift. Not because you're trying to change people, but because you've changed the climate. You've altered the emotional weather. You've made safety your legacy, and in that safety, others awaken. This is how you build an empire of trust. This is how you create loyalty that no algorithm can measure. This is how you become the person whose name travels from heart to heart, not as gossip, not as strategy, but as reverence. You didn't just talk about being a good leader, you showed it in how you treated others. You didn't just learn influence, you practiced it with care and consistency. And instead of chasing recognition, you focused on helping people feel better about themselves. And that is the highest form of wealth there is. Because when one person chooses empathy over ego, presence over performance, truth over convenience, it creates a ripple. A quiet revolution. One that doesn't make headlines, but heals lineages. One that doesn't dominate, but transforms. When you treat people with empathy and respect, the impact lasts longer than you think. Your kindness can influence not just one person, but everyone they pass it on to, including their children, their coworkers, and their communities. That's how you leave something behind that truly matters. You change how your children speak to themselves. You change how your partner breathes around you. You change how strangers feel after a fleeting moment in your energy. You bring calm into conversations, not because you try to control people, but because you've learned to control yourself. When you've taken time to understand your own struggles, you become more patient with others. That's how trust begins, with quiet understanding. Because you've stopped outsourcing your peace and started generating it. And from that quiet, radiant wholeness, you begin to lead. Not as a boss, but as a beacon. Great leadership doesn't come from forcing people. It comes from inspiring them. When you lead by example, others feel encouraged to grow, not pressured to change. And the world starts to shift. When you treat people with calm and clarity, they feel more at ease. When you speak with purpose and listen without interrupting, confusion fades. That's how effective leaders build strong teams, families, and businesses, by creating trust through how they show up every day. When you treat people with understanding, that's what they remember you for. When you speak with kindness and act with fairness, people trust you. And that trust built over time becomes the foundation of your reputation. Real trust isn't built through fear or authority. It's earned by being fair, honest, and willing to listen, especially when it's hard. Sometimes, choosing not to argue and simply showing patience builds more respect than any clever reply. When you stay calm under pressure and treat others with respect even in tough moments, that's real leadership. It's not something you can fake. It's something you show through your actions, day by day. And it is rare. People are drawn to those who make them feel accepted and respected. You don't need to fix anyone, just listening without judgment often helps them feel stronger and more confident. People don't expect you to know everything. But if you listen without judgment and make them feel understood, they'll come to you again and again. That kind of trust is built through empathy and patience. And slowly, you realize this is the real work. True success isn't just about numbers or recognition. It's about knowing your values and living them every day. When people see you stay true to yourself, it gives them the courage to do the same. What the world needs most isn't more noise or more tactics. It's more people who care. People who think clearly, act kindly, and listen with sincerity. That's the kind of leadership that makes a real difference. And yours is becoming one of them. Because you chose to care, even when it was hard. You chose to be honest, even when it was easier to pretend. And that honesty, that empathy, is what makes people trust you. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. You became a living answer to the question everyone is secretly asking. Is there still someone out there who truly sees me? Yes, there is. And it's you. And now, as the world continues its noise, you remain steady. Not because the world is quieter, but because you are. Not because the storm stopped coming, but because you learned how to stand in the rain without drowning. You learned that your worth was never in being unshaken, but in learning how to return, how to realign, how to remember your center, no matter how many times you're pulled. You can't always control the pace of the world, but you can control how you respond to it. By staying calm and focused, you help others do the same. When you speak with purpose and listen with care, your voice becomes one people trust and turn to. Because now you know, you cannot fake depth. You cannot shortcut resonance. You cannot buy the kind of energy that calms a chaotic room. You can only become it. And to become it, you must first learn to feel everything you once ran from. You must sit in the dark long enough to find the light within. Not a spotlight, not a stage light, but the slow, honest glow of self-possession. And when that light turns on, something ancient returns to you. A dignity, a direction, a peace that doesn't shrink to keep others comfortable, but neither flares to seek attention. It just is. And it changes everything. That is the light of empathy. Not as sentiment, but as strength. Not as charity, but as clarity. And with that clarity, you start to see what others miss. You begin to build what others only talk about. You begin to lead not with force, but with feeling. You begin to walk into every room, not wondering who will like you, but wondering who needs to feel less alone. And that is the wealth of the future, because everything the world pretends to value, status, attention, applause, it all fades. But presence, that echoes. When you truly listen to someone and make them feel important, they remember it for a long time. Sometimes, a small gesture, your attention, a kind word, a smile, can be the reason someone starts believing in themselves again. That's the power of showing up with care. And you, now, carry that power, because you no longer confuse silence with weakness. You no longer confuse kindness with naivety. You no longer confuse empathy with surrender. You now understand. When you try to understand how others feel, you build trust. That trust leads to better relationships, better teamwork, and better results. Empathy isn't just being kind, it's good business, and it's good leadership. And you are no longer waiting to become valuable. You are walking as value itself. You are no longer seeking permission. You are the permission. Instead of trying to impress others, focus on making them feel valued. People won't always remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. That's how you earn lasting respect, by showing genuine interest in others. Not loudly, not publicly, but eternally. People might forget your job title or your achievements, but they'll always remember how you treated them. If you make others feel respected and valued, that's what stays with them the longest. And that is a wealth no thief can steal. You've become the richest kind of human, the one who makes others feel rich in their own soul. And there is no higher reward than that. Ever.